Should you buy Space Marine 2? That's the question I want to help you answer today. It's a simple question, but I think it deserves a complex answer, both because the game deserves it and because we're all different. We're all different people. We're all coming from different perspectives, and yours is not going to be the same as mine. You might like or hate this game for different reasons than I like or hate it. Hey everyone, it's Night Haro here, and today we're talking about my review of Space Marine 2. So let's just go ahead and jump right in and talk about the pros and what I think is so good about Space Marine, and then we'll talk about some of the cons, and then we'll talk about the actual cons. We'll more about that later. So first off, if you've ever wanted to RP as a Space Marine, this game absolutely delivers. It lets you smash through Xenos and purge heretics like there's no tomorrow. What I mean by that is that the gameplay is amazing and it really delivers on that Space Marine. You feel like a Space Marine. When you power up a Thunderhammer to deliver just a mighty smash, you delete enemies with a multi-melta gun, you feel like a god among men. In short, Space Marine 2 delivers on its core promise that you embody a Space Marine. You are the ideal Space Marine. Second here is going to be the artwork and animations. They are absolutely amazing. The scale is on point for the Warhammer 40k universe. Everything's bigger, right? It's like being in Texas. Everything's big, everything's oversized. You're oversized compared to the average human, and everything around you even dwarfs you. The sheer number of executes and parries that they have programmed and motion captured into the game is amazing. You know, one of the things that with a lot of games like this is that, you know, you can see the same execute over and over and you're like, okay, yeah, I've seen this before. You know, you reach in, you grab the spine, you rip it out through their body. You're like, all right, you would think that you wouldn't get tired of this kind of thing, but you actually can. I would say that there is a lot of executes, a lot of parries where you kind of grab somebody when they're attacking you and, you know, stomp them, do something horrible to them. There's so many that are like programmed into the game that it doesn't get bored, at least not in any kind of short order. Easily artwork, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It's pretty high up there. You know, you can always find something better, but it's pretty great. The lore. This is something you see in every part of the game and it feels great. Now, if you're like a super diehard fan, you might have issues with a few things in the story. I know that there's been a few YouTubers, some that I like, that have commented on a few things. Again, I feel like a bit of a poser compared to the super hardcore fans of the Warhammer 40k universe, but I'll let other people explain that. You can go check out, other people's reviews and on the exact lore. But I think in general, it keeps with the lore, and you see a lot of details that clearly show that this game is a labor of love. The fourth thing here is going to be customization options. This really goes back to that fantasy fulfillment that I talked about earlier, where there are just a ton of customization options so that you can play your favorite chapter of Space Marine. I would say the only issue that I have with this as far as customization is that there are people that I've talked to that are like, hey, I would still really like to play a female character. It would be cool if they could have, implemented something with the Sisters of Battle. Lore reasons, whatever reasons, they didn't choose to do that. I get it, but it still would have been a nice to have. And I think for a lot of people that it would have also been nice to have. I know it's called Space Marine, right? But I still think there's a lot of people that would have thought it was really cool to play a Sister of Battle. Number 5 here is going to be combat and mechanics. The parry mechanics, the contested health and armor systems work very well. And most importantly, they provide that fantasy fulfillment where what you want any game, I see this in TTRPGs all the time, is that you really want to feel like you are, right? If you're a Space Marine, you should feel like you're a Space Marine. And for the most part, there are some issues. We'll talk about them in a minute. But for the most part, you absolutely get that in the combat. You have contested health, which when you take damage, your health turns white. And if you deal damage, your health will actually come back. So the game mechanic itself, if you think about it in, kind of abstracted, it doesn't really make any sense. But if you think about it in the idea of the Warhammer 40k universe, where you're supposed to be cleaving through Xenos, purging heretics and what have you, it makes sense. If you do those things that you feel like a Space Marine should do, swinging with abandon, going in and just killing everything in sight, then absolutely you get back health, and that makes you want to play that style of gameplay. You're not playing defensive, you're not running away, you're just cleaving through enemies, and that aligns perfectly with feeling like a Space Marine. Similarly, the armor system, whenever you parry, they call it parry, I think in all situations, but whenever you have a chance, someone's attacking you, you can defend and you can actually counter on them. You can also do executes. Whenever you do executes, you restore armor, similarly with getting those parries in. And so what this allows you to do is to continue fighting, keep wading through enemies as you kind of have these really cool cutscenes where, you're grabbing an enemy, you're ramming a chain sword through them or doing something else was kind of crazy. There's a lot of really fun executes. As I mentioned, there's a ton that they motion captured and put in the game, and they look amazing. There are, and the fact that you're trying to do that as part of the core gameplay. So when you are doing the things that make you feel like a Space Marine, you're playing the game optimally, which I think is really cool and really aligns with their goals. All right, now let's talk about a section I'm calling cons. So these are things that are cons to me, but that could be pros to you. And I hope that really with everything I say, even if I'm not specifically stating it, that you are looking at it in that way. I may say, I don't really like this game mechanic because of X. And so, I don't recommend it because of that. And you might say, oh, I love X. I love that kind of mechanic in a game. And you want to buy the game because of it. I really just want to inform you as best I can and let you make the buying decision for yourself. I just want you to be happy with your buying decision. So I hope you keep that in mind with everything that I do and with everything that I say, that that's the situation we're in. All right, so number one here, there is not enough depth to the combat system for me personally. And what I mean by that is I looked whenever I got to this point where I was like, you know what, I'm kind of bored with the combat. It kind of feels stale. I feel like I'm doing the same thing kind of over and over again. And I was at about the 20-hour mark. Now, honestly, it probably happened a bit before that, but definitely at the 20-hour mark, I was like, yeah, mark this time. At this point, I don't feel like there's anything new in the combat, and I'm not really enjoying myself as much. Now, on the upside to that, for all the, generally speaking, the majority of players, you're not playing that much, right? You're not playing games for a living like I am. And so that is really nice because you don't have to go in and relearn like super complex systems every time you want to pick up a game, right? You can jump right into this game, remember how to play. If you've forgotten anything, you can pick it up pretty quickly, and it's a lot easier to master as well. All of which are pros, again, for the majority of people. For me, though, I want a little bit more depth in my games so that I don't get bored quite so quickly. Again, I play a lot more games than the average person, so hopefully you won't have this same problem. Now, the second thing here is that with all the weapons, this is kind of a similar deal, is that they feel very much the same to me. I want more variety in my options. The same goes for classes. Having essentially one ability different from each different class is just not enough for me. Now, on the flip side of this also means you can easily swap between classes and not have to relearn things, right? So that might be a huge pro for you. I personally just would like a little bit more variety in my gameplay with the various classes. Leveling just feels like an XP grind, and there are no meaningful choices. Now again, this means that it's incredibly simple and easy. You just go through, fill out the tree. Sure, you could pick one thing or another at some given point, but you're going to get them all eventually, so it doesn't really matter that much. And so, this could be a huge pro for you. For me, it's a little bit of a bummer that there aren't more meaningful choices. All right, now let's talk about things that I actually consider cons, and I think most people would consider cons or things that could absolutely be improved upon, even if you are not too upset by these things. So first off, I found the gameplay in the campaign to be boring and tedious at times. Now, I didn't go on cranked up to super high difficulties because I was streaming and I didn't want people to just, it's not fun to watch someone die over and over again. I don't mind doing it, but I don't think it's entertaining. So, maybe on the higher difficulties, it would be a little bit more fun and engaging, but by and large, I was not impressed. The story is good. I'm not saying the story's not good, but the gameplay itself is, I wanted to quit several times in the middle of a stream while playing because I was just bored and it just wasn't fun. You can go check out the streams here if you want to see that, see those times. There also isn't much to the level design. The level design, it's fairly basic. They don't really feel that much different than one another. And so, I wish there were more there. Some people have commented that, going up in difficulty does add some variety because the mobs spawn randomly and you get bigger and more masses of mobs. And it does make you be more on your toes. I just don't think it's enough. At least it's not enough for me. And the other side of that is, this game, everybody says, hey, it's supposed to be made for casuals, right? The same people that saying, hey, it's made for casuals are also like, hey, oh no, if you go up in difficulty, then it gets more interesting. And it's like, well, these don't fit because a lot of people will never go up. There's some level of difficulty. They're never going to go past that. And so they're not going to get that experience. That is most likely, just by statistics, it's most likely you at home. And so this creates a problem, right? Where these kind of things, and we're going to find that a lot where it's like, yeah, if this was made for, the casual player, then this should be done different. And I feel like there's a handful of things. All right, moving on to combat. To put it simply, it's just, I don't think it's as well designed as it could be. What I mean by that is that many of the weapons just feel like identical versions to other weapons. So the power fist versus the chainsword. they feel almost exactly the same. The stats on them look almost exactly the same. And what you'll have is as you level up those weapons, they do kind of lean more into their own style. But it's like, well, why do I have to play for, 20 hours for each weapon before it feels different than another weapon? Doesn't make sense to me. I don't care for it. The same thing with the 6 classes. They often feel very similar. And what that means is that certain classes will feel like just better versions of other classes. And I think that's something that's just going to happen invariably. Talking about classes, the assault class. The assault class is the one that you see with the jump pack, right? And it flies up in the air and you're supposed to be able to come down. Now, I've seen all these really cool situations and I've had a couple in game, but I've seen all these, on all the marketing and everything where you're just flying and whatever. What you actually find in game is there's a ton of invisible walls.
God forbid you try and go above like a railing or a ledge. Basically, if you couldn't walk there, you can't get there with this little railing. Look at this little railing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't get over. Hold on, let me make it even better.
I know, man.
I can't get over the stupid railing.
I know the lack of verticality in this is. I mean, we're like big giant space marines, but we can do anything but jump.
There's also situations where like there's some junk in the way, and you're supposed to be this huge, powerful space marine, and you can't get past this junk. Clearly, it's just how they design the level. This is what we're talking about, where you have to go up the stairs and get to the second floor and then jump down to get past this, pile of junk. But I'm a space marine. Shouldn't I just be able to smash that stuff out of the way? It just doesn't really feel good. And the same thing that you have with the jump pack, sometimes, yes, you can fly up super high, but a lot of times you can't even fly up one level because they don't want you to. So it just doesn't feel good in a lot of situations to play the assault class. And there's other things like that, but I won't go too much in detail. Another thing, the combat, again, as we talked about with all of that, it feels 2D. The fact that you can't jump, the fact that the smallest little thing can stop you from moving. Yes, you can run through some certain things and you crush it and that feels great. But then it's like, well, I also can't, jump over this railing because there's an invisible wall here to attack the enemy on the other side. And that's very frustrating with some of these levels. Another issue that I have, and again, a lot of this stuff, I said that, hey, you feel like a space marine. You absolutely do. But there are some things that are immersion breaking and don't fulfill that promise. And that is with the big, heavy weapons. Powering up a thunder hammer to deliver a huge smash feels amazing. The issue is that they kind of suck. A big problem you have is you want to constantly be hitting enemies and that stuns them. It knocks them back and prevents you from taking damage, which is great. But the thing is, it just feels like faster weapons are better because of that. AoE weapons also feel faster because of that. And you want weapons that are better at parrying. The Thunder Hammer, the parry hammer, is amazing and works really well. But it's like, well, why is the one that's good at parrying? It's a Thunder Hammer. I just want to be like swinging through huge swaths of enemies and just absolutely deleting them. And so it's a bit unfortunate that way. It breaks with the immersion and it's just not fun. Similarly, when you compare the chain sword and the power sword has this really cool function where you can power it up and that's like the cleave mode, or you can unpower it and that's like the one-on-one fight. It's a cool idea. It's too hard to change between in combat. You really have to do it beforehand. And even when you're fighting a boss one-on-one, a lot of mobs spawn. So it's really clunky and awkward to power it up in the middle of a fight. And so I just find myself leaving it in power mode. Again, just weapons are too similar is basically, that covers it. I'm just giving you some specifics about situations where I think that's really an issue. PvP. Let's talk about PvP. So there's 3 aspects of the game, right? So there's the core PvE where you can group with people and do these repeatable missions. There's only 6, which I think leans to a lot of people feeling like, hey, the game doesn't feel finished or there's not enough content. And then there's also the solo mission or rather the playthrough of the main story, which takes about 12 hours, at least what they've quoted me. I'll be honest, I have tried probably 3 or 4 times and I don't want to do it. It's not fun. And I end up bailing each time. Most of those have been on stream. So you can go check that out. And then PvP is the other side. The PvP is basically a worse version of many similar games. And nothing really at all says Warhammer to me besides the artwork. It does not fulfill my fantasy of being a space marine in epic battles. The time to kill, so how long it takes to kill someone or be killed, is crazy low for that. So I think of space marines battling it out. They're slugging it, they're going back and forth. No, you're dead in like 1 or 2 seconds. Armor basically doesn't matter. You just die super quickly, and it it doesn't fulfill that fantasy of, being a Space Marine. The leveling in PvP also seems a little bit nonsensical to me. So the biggest problem in PvP is normally, or always, it's skill. And you have someone who's really skilled, who's been playing a lot, can crush somebody who's new, right? Well, they make this even worse because you level up in PvP and you unlock weapons. So later on in the game, you after you've been PvPing a lot, you're even more powerful. And so you can crush the new people even more. And it's just not that fun. There's also certain classes that I think are absolutely kind of meta, or at least a lot better in those PvP situations. And then again, there's just not that much to it. You go out, you kill someone in 2 seconds, or you die, vice versa, and you just respawn. There's nothing exciting. There's nothing really that interesting, at least to me. If you try to use some of your special abilities and you have someone sitting back there with a heavy, they can kill you before you get your special ability off because they take entirely too long. Looking at you, assault class, flying up in the air, if someone's shooting you, you're going to die. You're going to die long before you actually get a hit off on that person because there's a long stall and everything. It just feels like PvP was an afterthought, and there's nothing wrong with it. By and large, yes, they probably put a lot of effort into getting it to the point it's at, but to me, it doesn't hit. It's just not there. Going back to kind of looking at the game overall, the main things is that I don't feel like there's a whole lot of tactics involved. You do have to do some squad tactics as you go to the higher difficulty levels, but it doesn't feel like there's, it's a lot of skill that's involved. It feels like, okay, you just kind of do the same couple of things over and over again, and you'll do pretty well. At the highest level, maybe that's not true, but it feels a little overtuned there anyways. The game quickly also becomes stale, at least it did for me, and generally feels one-dimensional, and I don't feel like there's enough content. I feel like the folks that have that complaint are absolutely right, and I think it's a very valid complaint. Okay, now having said all that, do I recommend the game? That's the real question, right? Well, if you're a hardcore Warhammer 40k fan, I would say absolutely, but you've probably already bought it anyways, and you're just watching this video to see if I give an accurate and a good take, and if not, you're probably done by this point. You're already yelling at me in the comments. If you are somebody who is a 40k fan, but you haven't picked up this game, you're not sure about the style of game and what have you, I think that you're going to enjoy it. I personally, if you haven't bought it at this point, I would recommend waiting until it goes on sale, unless you are just independently wealthy and spending $60 on this isn't a big deal for you. I would say for me, I personally regret having purchased this game at full price. Once my friends stop playing it, I'll probably no longer be playing it. It's not that I think it's a bad game. It's just not a game for me. And for all the reasons I kind of listed. Now, if you're the average person, I think you're probably going to be in a similar boat to where I am. Even though there's a lot of things that are easy to access and what have you, as far as gameplay and what have you, I just don't think there's a lot of longevity in this. And if you're a casual player, you probably don't play that many games. And I don't think this is going to be one that you're going to want to keep coming back to over and over again. At least it's not for me. If you are a hardcore Warhammer fan, or you're not and you're actually considering getting into it, I personally, if you like computer RPGs that are in similar style to like Baldur's Gate 3, then I would personally recommend Rogue Trader. I've done a review here on the channel. I'll pop it up here in a second and link it. But I really recommend that. It's a great introduction to the Warhammer 40k universe. I love everything about that game. It is turn-based, it is tactical and what have you. So it's a totally different style of game than the third-person shooter and hack and slash that we have here with Space Marine 2. But I still really enjoy that game. Anyways, that's it for today. Appreciate you guys watching. If I missed anything I got wrong, let me know down in the comments below, and we'll catch you in the next one.